Hello, my name is Tina Huggins, and thank you for joining me here on my show, The Awakening, on WGSN-DB, the Going Bold and Going Solo Network. The information and opinions expressed on this show are just that, the opinions of the individual speaking based on their individual personal experiences. They are not intended to diagnose and do not constitute having professional advice or recommendations. So again, my name is Tina Huggins. I am your divorce coach specialist, a consultant, and a restorative family mediator. And I thank you for joining me here. And as you can see, I don't have a guest speaker with me today. It's just going to be me. So you're going to have to deal with just me at this point. And my topic today is moving on, starting the healing process. And for some of us, we often wonder, when does this start? How does this start? And so it all depends on you and your situation. For me, I recently lost my husband, so my healing process started, and we're going to kind of talk a little bit about that, as well as your healing process as you go through the divorce process or going through and coming out of an abusive relationship, whether that be with a significant other or an abusive relationship with a parent or a sibling, an aunt or an uncle or something in your life. Narcissistic abuse isn't just involved in intimate relationships. So my healing process and what I've been going through, I'm kind of in the middle of it, maybe more towards the beginning. But in my case, there are healing processes within the healing process. And I'm going to talk about some of that today. Each of us will go through different aspects of our life. And what signifies a healing or starts the healing process is when something shifts or something changes in our life. And we think oftentimes that death and divorce are two different types of things, and they are in that sense, but each of them we will go through the grieving process. And so in that grieving process, there's blame and there's acceptance and there's anger and there's sadness and there's so many parts and pieces. And some of them we go through many, many times in our process. And then others of them, we may just barely touch on them at all, if at all, as we move through and get to that part of acceptance. And that's all part of our healing as well. Going through the grief cycle, the cycles of grief, the stages of grief. And you can look that up, the stages of grief, and you can see all of the parts and pieces of the stages of grief. And that is all part of also the healing process. And again, we're going to go through all of that. And then we get to the end, which is acceptance. And in some cases we can accept, and that still doesn't mean that we're done in the healing either. We still continue. It's kind of like when you have an injury and you continue to heal, and even after you've healed and the doctor says you're healed, you still continue to get better. And that's what happens with us as we go through the healing process after a death, after a divorce, after abuse from a narcissistic partner or family member. And so for those of you who have been married to an abusive partner or to having a narcissistic person in your life, the process of healing is very important, because it's important for you and how you're going to move forward in your life. And so it's also important in how you will have a new relationship come into your life. You've got to go through that healing before you start a new relationship, because if you don't, you're going to restructure the whole thing all over again. You're going to draw the wrong people to you. You're going to be involved in additional narcissistic, abusive type situations, either at work or again in a family setting. And those are things that we don't want you to have to go through. So it's super, super important. So as I go through this whole talk today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that I've experienced and the things that I've seen. So I can tell you my own father has been in a very abusive relationship, to the point that he almost got murdered in that. And that's one of the reasons why this is so important for me to get these messages out, not just for women, but specifically for men, because you men, you you don't have the support system that women do. I'm here, I can support the man as well as the woman as you go through the divorce process or healing from a narcissistic aspect, an abuser in your life. And then because I've gone through the death of my husband, I also understand that healing process from that standpoint. So I basically understand the healing process from the inside out and on multiple levels. So when does that healing process start? That's a great question. So the healing process starts when something shifts or changes in your life. When we have that change, and that change can be anything from, say, we're reading books and we're connecting some dots and we're starting to understand the life that we're living right now is abusive, that we're being abused by our significant other, or maybe it's just in your family dynamic and you're being abused. And now you've read these books and you're connecting some dots, you're starting to see a bigger picture. That could be your shift. It could be a shift where you're out of the home from an abusive partner, you've left to get away from the abuse, or even arrested, and now you're sitting in a jail cell and you're sitting there just kind of reeling with what just happened. It wasn't necessarily your fault. I've had clients that have sat in jail cells because they were arrested because their narcissistic partner turned them in for something that they didn't really do. My own father had been turned in for something he never did. And the woman got bruises on her arms, got bruises on her shoulders, and she was able to say, or did say, that they were caused by my father, even though my father never touched her. These are things that happen in narcissistic abuse. And so because I've helped my husband go through some of the financial abuse and the things that he dealt with going through his divorce, I got to be, in the first seat, seeing a lot of the abuse that he was going through. I myself went through a situational abusive situation. Situational is slightly different. It's caused usually both people, and that's kind of why my clients end up sitting in a jail cell, is because the situation causes them to erupt, and that eruption usually is verbal. Sometimes it goes to a shove because one person holds that other person, stands in their way from getting out of a closet, for instance, or leaving a room. And so they shove them, and once they lay hands on them, then that person can call the cops, and then we have them arrested. And that's what we call situational abuse. You're not necessarily intending to put your hands on that person, but to just get out of the closet, get out of the room, and the other person, her or him, that's holding you or standing in your way, causes a situation by elevating their voice. So that's what we call situational abuse, which is different than the actual abuse that some of us go through on a regular daily basis. So we need to create change. That change is super important. And that, like I said, that change could be from reading books, sitting in a jail cell all alone, or realizing that things are just different. For me, back in the time frame, it was sitting in my car, driving in my car. I would leave to get away from the yelling and screaming. And that sitting in my car, driving in my car, was the change that I needed to start that healing process so I could move forward. In that aspect, we have this change. And once that change has happened to us, whether we are in the home, already out of the home, before we've ever filed, before we're really thinking about divorce, that healing can start to change, or that change can start the healing. And for others of us, we go through our divorce, whether it is 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, and that healing doesn't get to start until we're in a safe place emotionally, safe place physically. And once we're in that safe place, then that healing can start. That's when the change actually happens. So sometimes that's not till after the divorce is final. But we've got to get ourselves into a safe place, a safe space for our head so that we can think better. Once we've got there, the healing can actually start. And again, that can come about at any point during your divorce or in my case, from dealing with the death of my husband, what that was for me, that shift, that change was right after he died. We had all 8 of our kids present, 6 of his kids and my 2 kids, and they were there for almost a full week, helping clean up all of the personal belongings and everything, and because we had such a large area that things needed to be moved from and to. And once everybody left, I was alone, and it was silent. It was that silence that caused my change. It put me in a place that I knew I needed to do something different. I knew that I was in trouble in a lot of ways. So that healing process started. And there's lots of parts and pieces to that, as I'll go through and explain a little bit. But I want to kind of give you an instance about the process. Process is very, very, very important. And the process is going to be different for each and every single person, just like the cycle of grief and the stages of grief, how we go through them and how we bounce back and forth, sometimes between 2 or 3 of those stages. And the healing process is a lot the same way. But let me give you a for instance of a healing process. So just recently, I was riding with a friend on the back of a motorcycle, and we were within just a few inches of being in a very bad accident. So we were driving along the road, and about 10 feet higher, well, maybe even more like 15, 20 feet high, there was a parking lot that was up here. And the road would have come down this side, and then the side street would have been here. And we were going down this road, not quite to the side street, while a pickup bailed off that about 20-foot drop and just come down off the median right there and right towards the bike. And the person driving the bike, I was on the back, he was able to control the bike very well. And we had no problem. The bike got stopped. We pulled over. I got off. And this is when his healing process started. He got off the bike, ran after the truck, and yelled at the driver, basically trying to egg him to come back to deal with the situation. And the driver didn't. But that was the first step to his healing. He physically moved. That physical movement took all of the tension and stress outside of his body. And then his verbal took his emotions outside of his body. That is huge and so important, because our body really actually holds our memories, not our brain. Our muscles hold them, and a negative memory will hold itself in a negative way somewhere inside our body. Most of the time it's muscle, but sometimes it could be tendon and ligament. And the type of stress that was could have affected his eyes, it could have affected his neck, and it could have affected this almost instantaneous, just from the tightening up and the tension of realizing that we're almost going to wreck a motorcycle. And so the next stage of that healing process for him was to wait, to be still and wait. And that still and waiting was a state of shock for a moment for him. He and I didn't speak for just a few minutes. And then the neighbors that were there didn't really see the accident about to happen, but they did see the driver take off, and they saw us. So they came running down to us. And then the next step was my friend starting to communicate what just happened. So he talked with what they saw, talked about the person, talked about cops, let's get a hold. I had already called 911. We already had an officer on the way. And this created the time frame that helped my friend to relax, to get his composure back. And then he is defragging. He's talking to these people about the driver of the pickup truck and what just happened. And then the police officer came. And so there was more communication about what just happened, an exchange of information, obviously. And then the next step of the healing process was us getting back on that bike and heading back home. That was a scary event for him. And being on the back of the bike, I can tell you he was shaking just a little bit. And that is a scary aspect, not just for him, but also the rider. I knew that we were safe, and he knew that we were going to make it home safe. So we get home, and another phase of his healing was he got back on that bike the next day and he went for a long ride. Another step that I recommended that he go through was to talk to one of his besties that ride bikes with him and defrag the situation and talk about what just happened again. And I'm talking about this because that talking aspect is huge and very important. Again, if you don't talk about it and get it outside of your body, it's going to be stored somewhere in your body. It can be stored in a joint that could cause him problems with his wrist, elbow, shoulder in the process of trying to deal with the handlebars of the bike the next few times that he could go out. And that could cause an accident. Also, in what he's thinking about, that's another part of his specific healing process, is not reiterating negative things, not thinking about the negatives, thinking about all of the most important parts of the ride, looking, driving, blinkers, where everybody else is. Those are all part of his aspect. And he's pretty much so gone through that in just a couple of weeks' time, and his healing is pretty much so at the end. Although there will be times in the future where he'll still talk about that type of, or that specific event. And that's all just, again, relaxing it out of the body. So talking and communicating is huge for that. So like I told you, my process started once everything got silent in the house. For me, I had to turn on the TV, and it was on 24/7 for probably close to a month and a half, 2 months, because I couldn't handle the silence. I didn't want to hear my thinking. Some of the process of me going through this is my talking about it. And if you've followed me at all on TikTok, you know that I've been talking about some of what I've experienced. And that talking is part of getting it out and communicating. My last show, or one of the shows that I have with Herb Knoll, we talked about how important communication is, and the fact that Herb runs a men's support group for widowers. And so he gets to them and he gets them in communication, and he talks about, the stages of grief and the things that they might go through as they're working through their aspect of grief and their healing process. Again, it is important that when you go through something like this, that you heal before you move on. If you're in a narcissistic relationship and you don't heal, you are going to draw another narcissistic type person or negative situation to you. So we've got to get that healing process started, and we've got to get you through it before you're really involved in the next relationship. So after we've spent time talking, we really need to get into the place, this is a place where we allow things to start taking place. We allow the healing to start coming into place. So once things are stored into the body, so now we're going to go back and we're going to talk about, now we haven't talked about it. Once they're stored in the body, they can cause so many issues. I talked about my friend on the motorcycle and the joints and the things, but now with you not talking about what's happened, you've stored something in your body, and it can cause all kinds of physical issues as well as emotional issues. And those issues will eventually need to come out. And so if you're not talking about them, eventually those emotional issues are going to spurt out like a volcano, and it's going to cause you issues. And it will definitely cause you issues if you are going through divorce and you start to spew that out at your soon-to-be ex, either over text or in front of the children or other people that could testify against you in court, and you lose the kids if you have children, or you lose the battle that you're fighting with your soon-to-be ex. You don't want to look like the bad guy. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of those emotional outbursts with somebody who's trained to understand, like myself, a therapist, somebody that understands the situation. I understand narcissistic abuse. I understand physical abuse. I understand the pain of going through the divorce. I also understand that from the standpoint of losing my husband and having to go through the healing process. At this point, it's been on my own, but I have had support. I have people I talk to. I have a coach that I work with, an emotional support coach, and therapists that I have communicated with. And I have a multitude of people that I have as a support network. I have a friend, John, in Canada, who lost his wife about 15 years ago, and he is every morning and every night sending me some kind of statement. And as soon as situations happen, I text him and I kind of let him know where I'm at emotionally, because it's good for me. It's also helped him. I have another friend who lost his wife just 5 months before I lost my husband. He was on our last show with Herb Knoll, and he got to talk about his experiences. So you might want to go back and kind of listen to what was said by Herb and by Jace, and kind of see a little bit about that healing process from that standpoint. So when does this whole process start? So like I said, it starts when we go through that change, when something changes. So for me, like I said before, it was that silence. And then I've had little processes of healing within my process. So recently, my oldest son got married in Colorado. I'm living in South Carolina. And so I had to drive. I drove from South Carolina, spent about 4 or 5 days in Arkansas with a friend. And then I went on from Arkansas into Colorado. Well, that wedding day was a bad day for me. I was not in a good, safe place. Excuse me. I was not in a good, safe place emotionally. And somebody complained about my dog barking in the car and that I should move the car. So that was the straw that broke my camel's back that day. And so I left my son's wedding without ever even seeing the wedding, because my emotional body couldn't handle the situation. And one of the things that I can tell you is that you, whether it's divorce or death, it doesn't matter. We get to a bad day every once in a while. And if it's a bad day for work and you're not being able, then you need to leave work on a sick day. You need to take that break and get away. That's huge and important for your healing process. So in this specific case, it was sad for me that I wasn't able to watch my son get married. I didn't get to hear their vows, and I didn't get to be a part of that. Then after I left that, I ended up with a flat tire. And I started to change that flat tire, and God sent me an angel with a badge on. He was a DOW officer in the state of Colorado, and he stopped to render aid. We did what we could do, and we couldn't get the tire changed. And then lo and behold, I realized that it wasn't my front tire like my gauge told me. It was my opposite tire, the rear back tire, and it was completely flat. And I drove on it for, I don't know how long, why it was completely flat. Stopped again, and this time all of my family came from the wedding at that point, and they all stopped to render aid. I had my brother and sister-in-law, I had my sister and brother-in-law, I had my cousin and her fiance, and then my 2 boys stopped, and then another cousin brought stuff in to help fix the flat, because we couldn't get the lug caps off the lug nuts to get into my tire. Anyways, long story short, that was my visual. I got to see how many people supported me and how much love I had. Even my ex-husband and his wife joined in and stopped. They were getting out of the car, and it's like there was no need. We had 5 guys working on the tire. And so all of that support, and later text checking on me. My cousin Ryan came in and brought lug nuts so that we could replace those lug nuts that were on the car with something that I can get into the next time. And it was just the support that I had. And that was all part of my healing process, leaving the wedding and then the support coming. So this brings me to the word allow, like you heard me say earlier. We have to get to a point where we can allow those around us to be supportive to us. We have to allow the time to pass so that we can go through that healing process. We have to allow ourselves grace. That was the one thing that I was struggling with for the last few days prior to coming on to the show, is allowing myself grace, because I so blamed myself for not being able to be emotionally strong enough to be at my son's wedding. And it just was a fact. I wasn't emotionally strong, and just some crosswords from somebody just caused me to withdraw and have to leave. And I apologize profusely to my son for not being able to be present. And I've been reminded several times by my support system that you're still going through the grieving process and you need to allow yourself grace. If you're going through a divorce, you need to allow yourself grace. It's not an easy process. And let me tell you, you need support. You can't do it well alone. You can do it alone, but you can't do it well alone. And I can tell you, if I didn't have my support system through the death of my husband, I wouldn't be doing it at all. I might have run myself into the ground. So make sure that you find somebody that you can talk to, because talking is the most important part. And when you're going through a divorce, somebody who understands not just the divorce system, but the abuse that you've gone through. And like somebody put it earlier today, that you want to make sure that you talk to somebody. If you go through 1, 2, maybe even 3 divorces, you just know 3 divorces. I know hundreds of divorces. So that puts me to a better position to be able to help you through your 1, 2, or 3rd divorce. So I've talked to you about talking and then allowing. We have to get to a place that we can accept. We can accept that this is what's going on. And so when we're in a narcissistic abuse, we need to walk away from the abuse. But at some point in the divorce, we're going to have to walk away from money on the table, because it's going to cost you more money in lawyer fees to get to the money that's on the table than what the money is worth. $50,000 sitting on the table, is it worth $150,000 to go for that? If it is moral and that's the way you feel, then that is worth going for. But if it's just about the money and you feel like you need it at some point, you're going to have to accept and walk away. So I have gone through the acceptance stage several times. And like I said, the stages of grief, we go through them. I've gone through the acceptance stage several times. And then something will cause a little incident like the wedding. And then I have to get back to that acceptance stage. And I can tell you that I'm still starting into that acceptance, or maybe I'm in the middle of that acceptance stage, so that I can feel okay to step away from the situation with my son's wedding, with me not being able to be there. So we get to that acceptance stage. When we get there, we can start moving forward. And again, the acceptance may take a little bit. We may bounce back and forth from acceptance to some other stage of grief. And we get there, we then can start moving forward. Once we can accept and move away from the divorce, move away from the pain, which is kind of where I'm at, move away from the fear, which is where my friend on the motorcycle was at. When we can move away from that, then we can move forward into the next relationship, into the next bike ride, into the next family event for me, as I move forward with more strength, knowing that, okay, this is what a weak moment feels like. That's what I needed to get to. That I couldn't understand that feeling. And then once everything happened, I realized, oh, that was what a weak moment felt like. And so I needed to be extra careful with myself that day. Now I know what I need to do in the next family event to keep that from happening. And without causing, like, I could have gotten mad at the person that relayed the information to me. That would have caused a whole domino effect of negativity. And that's something we don't want to do, especially when we're going through divorce. We don't want to cause negativity with our ex, because that just bounces back into our lap, and we don't want to do that. So we have to let go in order to move away. We have to accept and let go. Let go of the money sitting on the table, let go of the pain that I experienced, let go of the anger that my friend experienced on the motorcycle. We have to let go of that and step away from it. Then we can look back at it and we can see what it looks like from a different point of view. When we can see that, we can see what we need to do, just like myself. I can see I felt that weak moment. I can now look back and see, oh, the next time this happens, this is how I need to take care of me, or this is how I can do better with dealing with my soon-to-be ex as I move through this divorce and co-parenting if you have children together. So we have to get rid of those negative emotions. We can't communicate with negative emotions or with emotions at all. If we communicate, just like me, if I had communicated that day, it would have been somebody, I would have felt worse, made me more sad, made me more hurt. I would have hurt people, and that hurting people then would have hurt my son and his wife. And that is not something I wanted to do. So my leaving was actually the very best thing that I could do at the moment. Now I know something else that I can do for the next time to prevent that from happening. So for me, I deal with some of that stress through, I've been recently dancing in the trees. I did martial arts for many years. And so I go in, put music in my ears, and then I'm able to do a special forms dance that I would do. And I do that in the trees because the trees is a special place for me. I listen to music. I follow certain TikTok channels that are very supportive for the situation I'm going through. I've found TikTok channels for my son who has ADHD. I have found TikTok channels for people who like to train dogs. There are channels out there either on TikTok or Facebook groups. And like Herb Knoll talked about in our last show, you can join support groups for widowers, for narcissistic abuse, for divorce. You can join those support groups. In the future, I am hoping to have 2 support groups, one for men and one for women that have been through the abuse and the divorce process, so that they have support from other like-minded individuals who've also gone through that. Reading books helps. Those are types of things. For me, driving also helps. So those are things that you can do as you move forward. Now I'm going to come back to allowing. Again, we need to allow this process to take place. For some of us, it won't be very long, just like my friend on the motorcycle, a week, 2 weeks, and he's completely through his process and everything's better. He can crawl on the bike and not know any difference. There's no stress held in his body. For others, like myself, I'm told that I need to go through a year of firsts, first Christmas, first birthdays, first everything. And that was a problem. That my son's wedding was the first family event that my husband was an aunt. And we need to go through those firsts, I'm told, before we can start into an official healing process. Now it's on the second Christmas, third Christmas, and so on. So everything starts to get better. And so we need to allow that process to take place. We need to allow our friends and family to give us love and support. We need to allow ourselves the ability to ask for help. Reach out to a certified divorce consultant coach, reach out to a therapist, reach out and find the people that can support you the very best in your situation, specifically on an emotional level. That emotional level is huge. If you don't have support on an emotional level, then you're more than likely going to go through your divorce spending way more money than you need to have. My clients save on an average of 10 grand to 80 grand. And that's just in the first year of divorce. So that's huge and important. And how? Because we deal with the emotions. We take the emotions out and we only use our head as we think. And that's the same with me. When my emotions are heightened, like they were at the day of my son's wedding, when those emotions were heightened, I wasn't in a safe place. And had I expelled negative emotions, then my son and his wife would have had a really negative experience. That's a whole lot better to have me not at the wedding than to have created a negative experience for my kid and his wife. So we've got to find a way, someone to talk to be able to release that. So I hope that something I've said here today is helpful for you and can give you what you need to have as you move forward in your healing process. So if you are starting the divorce or starting your healing process, it doesn't matter where you're at through this, starting the divorce, even at the end of the divorce, it's over, but you've got to move forward in healing. You've got to talk to somebody that can help you. Co-parenting issues might come up if indeed you have children. But I have worked with people in going through the healing process from death, from divorce, a lot from divorce, obviously, because that's what I do, but from fighting and having family members that they have to get out of their life because of the narcissistic abuse. So find somebody that you can reach out to and get that type of support. So I myself am a certified divorce coach, and I work as a divorce consultant, helping people understand their divorce process. That means the certification means that I'm trained in divorce. I am trained in the emotions of divorce. And in my case, I have to keep up my continuing education to keep my certification regular. So I specialize in high conflict divorce, especially that from toxic narcissistic partners. My husband, Joe, experienced that type of abuse. My dad experienced that type of abuse. And I myself ended up with a broken hand, separated ribs, and a dislocated leg from fights in an abusive situation. You can contact me through my email at coachtinalynn@gmail.com. That's coach, C-O-A-C-H, Tina, T-I-N-A, Lynn, L-Y-N-N, @gmail.com. And my website is divorcecoachspecialist.com. You can also find me on social media. I'm on Facebook under Tina Lynn Huggins, and you can contact me here as well. And you can also find me on TikTok under Divorce Tina. So if you are in the middle of a domestic situation and you need law enforcement there, call 911 or in the UK, 999. Joe would often say, please make sure that you get the restraining order and keep the restraining order. That is your ticket out. And you want to keep that restraining order and continue moving forward and try to keep that restraining order in place until the divorce process is over and well behind you before any of that is released. That keeps you safe. If you are dealing with domestic violence, please call a domestic violence hotline at 800-799-7233. That number again is 800-799-7233. If this has been helpful, please like this, comment on it, and share it with others so that we can help others. And thank you for your time. And I wish you many, many blessings as you move forward through your life. Thank you.